The era of oil is coming to an end. At least that's what the International Energy Agency believes, suggesting that we could reach peak oil demand sometime around the 2030s, possibly as early as 2028. But for now, oil prices continue to rise. And do you know why? Because the era of oil will never end. There is an entire industry in the world that transforms black sludge into everything from plastic to the clothes we wear, from medicine to fertilizers, without which we cannot survive. All of this is produced using oil, and this will continue for decades to come. At the same time, the world is persistently trying to break free from its oil dependence. The EU and Japan have pledged that by 2035, all sales of new cars will be electric, while the two global superpowers, America and China, are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on national renewable energy projects. And it's understandable. You don't need to be a financial analyst to realize that in a couple of decades, we will likely be using less oil than we do now, simply because oil is not an unlimited resource, and many countries are trying to prepare for this. So, if for some this is good news, for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia it is a nightmare, or at the very least a serious challenge. Why? Because Saudi Arabia is not just about holy sites, deserts, and mosques. It is a country with a lot of oil, an indecent amount of oil, to be precise. Saudi Arabia owns nearly 1/5 of all proven oil reserves in the world. Unlike Venezuela, which actually has the largest reserves, Saudi oil is cheap and accessible. The country's main oil field stretches 280 kilometers in length, reaches a depth of 100 meters, and accounts for about 50% of all oil extracted in the country. This makes Saudi Arabia the second largest oil producer and the world's #1 oil exporter. At the same time, Saudi Arabia produces far less oil than it actually could. Throughout 2020, the country deliberately reduced output, and after production cuts, logistical issues, and the conflict in Ukraine, the state oil company Saudi Aramco reported an astonishing profit of $161 billion. An incredible figure, yes, but this is precisely Saudi Arabia's biggest problem. And what is that problem? They're entirely dependent on oil. 40% of their real GDP, 70% of their exports, and about 75% of their average government revenue come from oil extraction. Their prosperity depends entirely on oil prices on the global market. Saudi Arabia is a country with no income tax and a very unusual labor distribution. 1/3 of the population works on contracts with foreign companies, while more than half of employed citizens work for the government, and they are completely dependent on how much oil money flows into their accounts. Imagine this. They can extract a barrel of oil for about $4 and sell it for $80. That's a $76 profit per barrel. This is known as oil rent. Essentially, Saudi Arabia does not have a functioning economy, or rather it would be more accurate to call it a rentier economy. And this is why, despite the world's plans to reduce its reliance on oil, the country is doing two rather strange things. First, they are expanding their oil and gas production capacity, refining operations, and the export of previously untapped reserves. Second, despite the high prices in the early 2020s, they are in no rush to spend the enormous sums of money they are making. Instead, they are aggressively investing. Why are they doing this? Because otherwise the world will forget about them. You understand that selling sand and camels won't get them far, so they have to act fast. But what exactly are they planning to do? Do they have a plan? Yes, they do. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has a plan, and it is incredibly ambitious. By 2030, Saudi Arabia wants to transform its entire economy beyond oil, position itself at the forefront of technology, and establish one of the best educational institutions in the world. The country is spending billions on solar and wind energy projects and aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. They're also investing in desalination plants and agriculture. And you know what? It's working. They want to become a regional hub for finance and logistics, with new fintech developments in cities like Riyadh and Jeddah. They are investing in everything related to science, from artificial intelligence to flying cars and the Saudi Genome Project. They are pouring astronomical sums into building new housing across the country. And most importantly, in their new green capital, Riyadh, they are providing massive funding for anything produced within Saudi Arabia. Right now, that mainly means petrochemicals. But their biggest bet? Tourism. So what do you need to attract tourists? Something massive and unique like Jeddah Tower, which is projected to become the tallest building in the world once completed, or Trojana, a futuristic city designed as a ski resort in the middle of the desert, or the macabre a 400-meter-high cube that will house a self-contained eco-city inside, or Kidia, a dopamine paradise where visitors can do anything from water parks to racing circuits, watching any sport imaginable, or playing in a dedicated esports stadium. And of course, there's the line, the city of the future, a 170-kilometer-long linear city. You have to admit, it sounds pretty cool. But why are they doing all this? Because they want 100 million tourists to visit Saudi Arabia every year by 2030. According to their plan, this should contribute 10% of their GDP, while 1 million citizens will be employed in these ambitious projects. Of course, Saudi Arabia already has a thriving tourism industry, but it is mostly centered around Mecca, where every Muslim is strongly encouraged to make a pilgrimage at least once in their lifetime. Sounds complicated and expensive? It is. But now it's clear how Saudi Arabia plans to reduce its dependence on oil, and that's exactly the point. Even the Crown Prince himself acknowledges that Saudi Arabia suffers from oil dependency. And the main goal is to diversify the economy to protect the country from any future oil crises. Moving away from oil is crucial for both national security and economic growth. But what is the price of these changes? Let's just say it's not cheap. We're talking trillions of dollars. Trillions, plural. Saudi Arabia plans to create over 500,000 government jobs, but there's a problem. Government jobs, which are mostly reserved for Saudi citizens by birth, are still funded by oil revenues, the very thing they are trying to move away from. They need to develop the private sector, which, to be fair, is growing rapidly and highly profitable. But the real challenge? It's hard to tell which industries are actually working and which are not. Why? Because they have so much money that everything seems profitable. Take Lucid, for example, the first ever car manufacturer in Saudi Arabia, producing luxury electric vehicles. It is 60% owned by the National Oil Fund. And across the country, about 80% of non-oil economic growth over the past 5 years has actually been fueled by money coming from oil sales. So today, the country is still far from financial independence from oil. A difficult dilemma. The kingdom is in a tough position. If they don't invest in the private sector, Saudi workers have no incentive to do anything other than collect their oil rent through comfortable government jobs. But if they do invest, they become more dependent than ever on oil money, which flows into everyone's pocket simply because of how the country's industrial policy is structured. So, the Crown Prince needs something else to solve this problem. Enter the Sheikh's Investment Fund. This is where the Public Investment Fund, PIF, comes in, a sovereign wealth fund and one of the largest oil-backed funds on the planet. And, ironically, it could be their golden ticket out of a rentier economy. The PIF is a diversified portfolio investing in everything, from Uber to Nintendo. Its total managed assets exceed $700 billion, and it's rapidly approaching the $1 trillion mark. This fund is one of the Crown Prince's key tools for moving Saudi Arabia beyond oil. How it works. The strategy is relatively simple. Instead of the government being at the mercy of oil price fluctuations and production quotas, they redirect a large portion of oil profits into the PIF, let the money grow, and only then spend it. This way, funding flows into the budget regardless of oil prices, making it the best way to use oil revenue for critical investments like infrastructure, healthcare, and education. The Saudi royal family has become one of the largest domestic and international investors. A new tech giant emerges. They're already involved. A video game company, they're in. Electric vehicles? They've got the money. Travel and tourism? They'll take that too. Recently, the Public Investment Fund, PIF, financed an entirely new airport and even launched a national airline. And do you know where else Saudi oil billions are flowing? International sports. The fund bought Newcastle United. They own 4 clubs in the Saudi Pro League. The Saudi Investment Fund manages 3 of the world's biggest professional golf leagues. They signed Cristiano Ronaldo to a $200 million per year contract to play for Al Nassr. They're hosting the AFC Asian Cup in 2027. They secured the 2034 FIFA World Cup. They will host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. Yes, Winter Games in Saudi Arabia. And that's not all. They've poured billions into tennis, boxing, cricket, MMA, motorsports, and horse racing. They are spending all this money to attract 100 million tourists, who will then spend tens of billions of dollars in the country. But what's the ultimate purpose behind these insane investments? Why build a giant cube or buy Ronaldo? 1. Branding. Brand strength matters, not just for companies, but for entire countries. And right now, Saudi Arabia doesn't have the best global image. When most people think of Saudi Arabia, they think that's the country with a lot of oil. But it's not a place like Paris or Rome where people dream of visiting. If Saudi Arabia can sell itself as a leader in luxury and innovation, it will boost its ability to do business with foreigners, attract talent and investment, and make sure everyone remembers the name Saudi Arabia. 2. A new social contract. For decades, the Saudi social order was simple. The government extracted and sold oil. The people either worked directly in oil-related jobs or benefited from oil-funded subsidies and social programs. In exchange, the royal family had absolute control over politics, social norms, and most of the economy. At the same time, strict laws are gradually easing. Women can now drive. Cinemas are open to the public. Music can be played loudly in public places. Alcohol is now allowed, though only for diplomats and non-Muslims. If Saudi Arabia can transition into a highly skilled, highly productive economy, then this entire program will be worth it. They might even become one of the first oil-rich economies to escape the oil curse. The real question, can they escape oil dependence? Openness, massive projects, and ambitious reforms are exciting, but buildings don't create an economy. People do. Will Saudi Arabia truly break free from its oil rent dependency? Right now, it's unclear. All we can do is watch and see how it unfolds. Love you guys. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.